What was your first audition?
I must have been about 5, maybe 4. It's hard to remember because of both the brain damage and the years that have gone by. I don't remember it being great, but the mythology of the household is that I cried a great deal and that nonetheless they kept pushing. And here we are. My big childhood claim to, mediocre fame, but now very hip, is Pee-wee's Playhouse, which I was always deeply proud of. I still think is the coolest thing I have to contribute is that zinger. And I played Opal on that show. So that was my big achievement by about 6. But prior to that, I think I'd done a bunch of commercials. Minute Maid, Hershey's, etc. And, they didn't all air, which is really what you're after when you're a child actor in the commercial business. You want them to get on the air if you want to get your imaginary Lamborghini, which is what I was hoping for. I didn't get the Lambo. I do think that I have a sort of vaudevillian bent. I think that I'm sort of built for a life of juggling emotions. I don't know that I enjoyed, carrying a briefcase and getting on the train and the commute. But I do think I always enjoyed a great deal the world of imagination. So I think that Pee-wee's Playhouse, for example, was a great source of joy in my life. It was such a world of beatnik, hep cats that kind of played jazz instruments. Right. It felt more like an extracurricular activity. But sort of the fanfare around it was always, I think, disturbing and confusing, as it continues to be.
You always had this, sounding older than you were voice.
Yeah, thanks to a lifetime of smoking cigarettes, which they recently discovered is actually good for you. It got thicker and deeper over the years, and increasingly, all the time, I'm becoming more and more like both Kathleen Turner and Shelley Winters. So that's the good news. It was the 80s, and you remember the 80s. Crazy Eddie was huge, and so was cocaine. People had grandiose fantasies of what they wanted out of life, and fame was hot. Those were the times. Grace Jones was big. David Lee Roth. Christopher Walken was a name I would hear often in my house as a sort of litmus test of achievement, and I think that's what my parents were after. Prior to that, the now less popular Woody Allen was also an achievement. I auditioned for Sons of Beverly Hills and for Everyone Says I Love You. Everyone Says I Love You. I think that I did not get the memo that you're not supposed to reply to Woody Allen. And I rollerbladed in my very long khaki skirt because I was going to a yeshiva, even though we were not religious. I was on scholarship, and I was stoned. And I came into the office, and he said, so what's your story? And I launched into sort of an hour-long rambling monologue about my life up to that point, my dysfunctional parents, their attempt to salvage their marriage by moving to Israel in a sort of Zionistic fantasy of making it all work that was really masking tax evasion and so on. And I think somewhere in this rambling tale, he became convinced I should play his daughter. I was shocked every day that I didn't get fired. I would hear so many rumors about how people would get fired for seemingly smaller infractions. I would only sometimes arrive. If I was wearing my Groucho Marx makeup, I would smear it somehow while sneaking a cigarette. I can remember I was doing a lot of listening to Portishead on a roof of a hotel in Venice, sneaking cigarettes. I was bad, but just learning how to become bad. I think I was in over my head, and also, looking back, maybe just a tween. Sons of Beverly Hills, I think, was more grounded in that by then I discovered Cassavetes. So I had a sort of sense of what it meant to feel uncomfortable in skin and it be okay to portray that on screen. That sort of an inner and outer life could be married and also have a sense of humor. So now I've created a show called Russian Doll. I play a character named Nadia Volvikov. I'd always had this fantasy of playing sort of a Philip Marlowe type, but specifically Elliot Gould's Philip Marlowe in Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye, as opposed to, let's say, Jack Nicholson's in Polanski's Chinatown, or Humphrey Bogart Philip Marlowe. But the Elliot Gould Philip Marlowe always really appealed to me. He was a mumbler, and he had a missing cat. I think that I was sort of curious about that, of what does it mean to have a life? And so the exercise, I think, of Russian Doll was also in a way to create a dialogue with the audience around a sort of embracing and losing shame around inner brokenness and recognizing that it's a nice thing to move from a disconnected life to a more connected one, where we become sort of participating members of, this trip that we're on, because what else are we going to do about it?
What's your karaoke song?
Tina Turner, Private Dancer, is my karaoke song. The thing is that all the men come in these places, and all the men are all the same. You don't look at their faces. You don't ask their names. You don't even think of them as real men. You don't think of them at all. And the part I really like is then towards the middle, she's like, Deutschmarks are dollars, American Express will do nicely, thank you. Let me loosen up your collar. Tell me, do you want to see me do the shimmy again? And I think it's that I'm really after. That's sort of the click for me. Just sing it in a loop, and it becomes increasingly torturous for the people around me. I think my first kiss was actually on the set of Dennis the Menace, starring Walter Matthau and Joan Plowright. Yeah, it was with Devin Rattray, who's in Russian Doll in the second episode at the cash register. He's also the big brother in Home Alone. I played Dennis the Menace's babysitter. He came over for a visit. We made out. I had such a big crush on him, and we kissed on screen. That's weird. That's your first kiss. I do think it's weird now, being a parent of 6 children who I've never met or seen. I do think that it's strange to sort of put a child in showbiz and then be like, no, go make out with someone. Yeah, I think it's weird. This year, for my birthday, in Los Angeles, I screened Lena Wertmüller's Seven Beauties, and here in New York, I screened King of Comedy. And that was fun. King of Comedy went over bigger. It's an easier movie to watch, but Lena Wertmüller was actually the first woman ever nominated for Best Director. So I thought it was a good movie to see, and, it's a Holocaust picture, but Mussolini, not Hitler. My cinematic crush.
It can be male or female, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, my boyfriend, Fred Armisen, was there, and so I feel like it's okay. I have a crush on him. Fred, I have a crush on, but I'm also actively acting on that crush on a daily basis. And so I say that all as a long way of saying that recently we watched Viggo Mortensen together in Eastern Promises, and Mamma Mia, that sauna scene. And I sat there with Freddie, and I took screen grabs, and I told him that they were for research. I was researching a future picture I had not yet written. And what a wonderful performance.
Yes.
And I don't mean that just, on aesthetics. It was the inside stuff, the insides. And again, I love my boyfriend, but Viggo in the Eastern Promises, really, he looks good in and out of his clothes. And that's something I really admire about his work in the movie. And, usually when I play this game, I think it's best to play it with dead people, to say like, oh, isn't Peter Falk a babe? Because it's an easier game for people to accept, and yet here we are. I was also very disappointed to discover that Idris Elba and I did not get married. It was a shock to my system, and I think many women felt the same. I have so many crushes. Also, the dragons on Game of Thrones.
Are you a Game of Thrones fan?
Not only am I a Game of Thrones fan, but I would sleep with those dragons. I would sleep with the Night King.
Even with the zombie dragon?
I would sleep with a good, healthy number of zombies. And Dracula's, Nosferatu, Gary Oldman as Dracula, that's all my type, yes. My first pet's name, I had a dog named Rocky, after Sylvester Stallone. The first street was East Shore Road. Rocky East Shore Road.
That's your porno name.
Yes, it's not very seductive, is it? It's a sort of a long-winded porno that lets you know it's going to be more trouble than it's worth. Yes. Rocky Shores maybe is a little bit better.
Rocky Shores is good.
That's the John Waters version, yes. My secret skill is, between 86 and 88 during the Intifada, I was living in Israel. And at the time, I was a young girl, 6 to 8 years old, or 8 to 10 maybe. I swallowed a number of shekels. Those are Israeli coins. And they got stuck in my larynx. And that's where they still are today.
Oh, my God. You weren't kidding. They never passed.
No, I just smoke around them.